Welcome to Faith Talks Wood Podcast. I'm Will from Flat Woodworks.
And I'm Tom from Mountain Valley Maker.
And we're a podcast about everything from Jesus to joinery, and we talk about it all. And just like we're about to talk about the fact that, Tom, the exhaust on my car fell off, and I kind of knew it was coming. I heard an exhaust leak on it, but I was on my way home from work and come to the bottom of this hill, and I stopped, and it must have shifted enough, and the right behind the catalytic converter and right before the resonator, it split. And I was, for the next 4 miles on my way home, I was driving a stock car. But the silver lining is finding a good shop. And so if I would have taken it to the dealership, it probably would have been $1,000 bill, because they would have said, oh, we got to replace the whole exhaust, all this stuff. Well, local shop here, not far from our house, like 3 miles away, good old boy. I dropped it off. He looked at it and he inspected my car, which is a whole thing in Pennsylvania, and then fixed the exhaust for under $250. And so that's just one of those things. Like, I always tell people, if you can find yourself a good local shop, just good small business that they're honest people. I'm always about supporting the local economy. Dealership, sometimes it's a necessity, but I'm all about supporting that local small guy. So I was blessed to be able to get the car fixed for a pretty inexpensive date. So, but man, how's your week been? Well, you've had a kind of a crazy week.
Yeah, it's been a crazy, tiring week. I think I told you last Sunday I left and drove to South Carolina. So I left on Sunday, drove all the way to South Carolina in 2 days, spent a few days with my mom, helping her around the house and fixing some things, helped my uncles finish my mom's deck. One of them's 70 and one of them's 84, and they've been down there graciously helping make repairs on my mom's deck since I live so far away. But it was fun to hang out with them and finish that up. And then I drove to Georgia, got a piece of equipment on Thursday for my neighbor, and then drove all the way back and got home Saturday morning. And
so how many miles, to give people perspective, how many miles from your front door to your mom's front door?
Like, I don't remember the exact, but it was like 3,800 miles I drove round trip. So like it's about 1,800 miles. And then of course, you get off exits and fuel, and I drove a little while I was there, but I want to say it's like 1,786 or something. Yeah. A long way.
Yeah.
I would rather stand outside in the sun for 12 hours and do physical labor than I had to sit in a car. My hat's off to truck drivers that can do that for a living. I cannot sit still that long, man. It drives me bonkers. I listen to every podcast I listen to, and I ran out of podcasts. And then there's areas like in Kansas where you can't even get a radio station. And I'm like, man,
I'm kind of weird. I actually love car rides. Like, I'd get in the car and drive to your house, not even think twice about it. Like, I love traveling, and I didn't grow up doing it. It wasn't until I was in my 20s before I really traveled at all. And so I remember the longest I've ever done. Now I've done the 12-hour between Nashville and Pennsylvania overnight straight through drive several times. But we drove from Pennsylvania to New Orleans. We went down there on a mission trip after Hurricane Katrina happened, and that is a drive. But probably about the same as what you drove to go from Pennsylvania to New Orleans. I think it was over 1,500 miles one way, and that was a long couple days. But yeah, I could do it. I have no problem. I love traveling. I love seeing places. I love doing all that stuff. But
now I like traveling and I like seeing places, but to get in a car and drive. So I drove 8 hours the first day, but then I woke up at 4:00, started driving, drove past Nashville, and then I was like, I'm not ready to stop. I'll drive a few more hours. Then I was like, I'm only 3 hours from mom. So I drove 18 hours in one day. I was exhausted when I got there.
Yeah, no kidding. And you probably had traffic through Nashville, I'm sure.
The funny thing is typically every time I've gone through Nashville, I end up in a traffic jam for an hour. And this time it was about 15, 20 minutes. And that was it. Dude, I couldn't
light.
believe it. I got through there and I was like, wow, that was the best I have ever.
What time were you hitting it?
I was hitting it right about 6:00, or it was about 5:45. And that's why I couldn't believe I made it. But I think all the traffic was leaving Nashville because the opposite side was backed up for 5 miles. And
right.
But
that's awesome. Well, before we get into the next part of the podcast, I just want to say thank you guys who support the podcast, who listen to the podcast, and we have several patron supporters. And if you'd like to become a patron supporter, you can do so on patreon.com/Faye Talks Wood. We really, really appreciate all the support we get over there, and also give us a 5-star review on Apple. Like 80-something% of you guys listen on Apple, and so that really helps us get found. And then pray for the podcast. We love this podcast, and we want to continue in God's will in this podcast. So, with that being said, Tom, who do we got on the podcast today?
Man, I tell you what, when I first got on Instagram, I don't remember exactly how I stumbled across Michael, but somehow in the process, we stumbled across each other's page and started watching his content. And it's just very entertaining. He has a quirky sense of humor and always has a way of making you laugh in his reels. And then figured out he was a believer, and we got to be buddies and started being prayer partners. And it's just been a fantastic friendship that's grown over the last 6 months or so. And so without further ado, Michael Oliver from 10,000 Makes. Welcome to the podcast, man. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
But before you get going, I gotta say, so 10,000 Makes, is that because you're in Minnesota and
yeah, you get it. It's a joke.
Yeah. I like it. The play on the state. I like it.
yeah. Like, we're the land of 10,000 lakes, but I think there's way more. I haven't counted them recently, but I think there's way more than 10,000.
That's interesting. Do you know, is there a geological reason why you guys have so many lakes?
I can make it up. I think it's probably a giant, glacial pathway that went through, but I have no idea. Come on.
Okay.
It sounds right though, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Probably is. I'll look it up because I'm not I'll find some Wikipedia page talks about it, but
I'm sure it is. This giant ice cube pushed through this region years back and then ended up melting and left a bunch of beautiful fishing holes behind. And
absolutely. All right. So, we got that out of the way. You're in Minnesota. So tell us about yourself, man.
Sure. You betcha. Yeah. Man, I'm just trying to make a way for myself and my family. And I live just south of Minneapolis region by about 45 minutes. Live with my beautiful wife and my 3 young kids, a golden retriever, our big house and our big yard. And we're just living the American dream.
That's awesome.
How old are your kids?
Easy, right? It's total chaos around here. It's like a dumpster fire any given night in my house, getting kids to baseball or dance or fed, clothed.
How old are your kids?
Oh my gosh. I'm going to say 12, 10, and 8 because I'm rounding up in certain areas. But by the end of the summer, it'll be easy because they'll be 2 years apart.
So I get to look forward to that. I've got he'll be 4 in 2 weeks, and then I've got a 1-year-old. So
right. Otherwise, it's like, okay, who's turning? Okay, so my son is 7, but he's gonna be 8 in like a couple months, and then okay, my daughter's 11. She's gonna be 12 though. Okay, all right, but that's in like 3 weeks. So yeah, I just got to start rounding up.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. So 2 sons and a daughter.
2 older daughters. And my son is the youngest.
Okay, gotcha. Awesome.
Yep, they keep us busy.
Yeah, I've got one of each. My youngest is the daughter. And it's funny. I tell people, man, she is wild and she is fierce and independent and aggressive. And my boy, who's my older man, he's goofy and likes to have fun and stuff, but he's more sensitive, a lot more. If you set a rule or you say something, he's going to be more to follow it. And my daughter, just a year old, man, you see it in her eyes. She's like, "Oh, I'm going to test that."
It's like, what did I do earlier in life to deserve this? So you know exactly what you did.
Right.
It's so funny when you see yourself in your kids at those moments, and you're like, "Oh, that's why you're like this. This is payback."
We're still trying to figure out my daughter. So my son is a spitting image of me.
Right.
Very much. I was pretty reserved, didn't like to get in trouble, was a goofball, but a closet goofball kind of, just, and my wife is very introverted. I'm extroverted, but my wife's very introverted, grew up in a strong Christian household, very disciplined. And my daughter, I don't know, man, she just like loves to laugh, wild. She'll slap you in the face and then laugh about it. She's a year old, it's just like, yep. And so I don't know where she got it from. We're still trying to figure that out.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's amazing how different they can be, isn't it?
I tell you, the funny thing is I have one brother, and how my mom survived raising the two of us is beyond me, because I was just the most mischievous kid on the planet, man. I was into everything. And then my brother, he's the biggest slob on the planet, man. He never picked up anything. He did well in school. I did not. I was always wanting to work. But I definitely had my share of trouble growing up. And my daughter is an angel, man. Like, she has never given us, it's like, I don't know how I got so lucky and blessed to have a kid that amazing. I see other people's, and I'm like, whew, I got lucky. But
the only lucky thing that I have on your
side, Tom, I was pretty rambunctious growing up, and I'm sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop where my kids are gonna like turn on us.
That's where I'm at, is that the blessing that we have, our kids are good kids. Like, we could take our kids in public and they're better than most adults, but they sleep. And since the day both of them were babies, they sleep like a rock through the night. And so, and that's they say that if the dad can sleep, the kids do. I can sleep through, I'll give you an example. 2 houses ago, 3-4 houses down from us, caught on fire middle of the night, and every police department in Nashville area was there, or every fire department. I never heard a peep. I slept through the whole thing.
Wow.
And so I can sleep. My wife, you drop a pin, she's waking up, right? So I don't know, but yeah, that's the blessing we've had, is that our kids are good kids, but like, they both sleep. Never been a problem, really. Just put them in bed and it's lights out. But man, that's awesome. So Mike, tell us, one of the things we like to do on the podcast is talk about how you've come to where you're at in your faith in Jesus and what that journey's been like. And so tell us about who you are and about your testimony and how you got to where you are today as far as your walk with Jesus.
Yeah. Thanks, Will. And thanks for having me on, guys. This is just such a wonderful platform, and I've been listening for a while now. And since I met you, Tom, and have been talking with you, you guys are so bold in sharing your faith, and you bring other people to give them a platform to share their faith as well. That's really important and super exciting for me to be on. So just really humbled that you would ask for me to be on, Tom, and really appreciate it. My walk is not as explosive and motivational as some that I've heard on stages, throughout my life. Just in that I feel at times I've felt like, this is kind of boring. Like, I never had like this massive come to Jesus moment and turned my whole life around type of thing. And you hear some of these testimonials that are just ground shaking, life changing moments in people's lives. And you think, oh, that's spectacular. I wish I had that type of moment in my life. But the more I've thought about, and the older I get, I am more reflective and thankful for having been brought up as a believer. Since the earliest I can ever remember going to Sunday school. And it really, I think of my faith journey as in phases. And the first phase of my faith journey was my church, and specifically the building, and then also the people that we met within that building. But it was, so I grew up going to this church, Richfield United Methodist Church, here in the Minneapolis area. And I grew up in the same folks that I grew up in the same church that my folks got married in. So they had already deep ties within the church and within that congregation, and their best friends in the world were their friends at church, and they all kind of had babies together at the same time, throughout this age of young adults. They actually had a group they called Young Adults. It wasn't a very creative name, but they would go camping together, and they'd start to bring the kids once they had kids, and they just called it Young Adults. And so that was a really tightly knit group, and they're still really tight friends in their 60s and 70s now. But I grew up going to that church, and my best friends in the world are still folks that I met in that church as well. I mean, like when any given day that I'm hanging out with buddies and my kids are playing with their buddies, it dawns on me sometimes of like, I wouldn't have this lifelong relationship with this person if I didn't go to church with them, if I didn't share this bond because of our different walks of life or different, places we've lived throughout Minnesota. Even folks that have moved on and moved out of state, we still share this lifelong bond. So that was kind of this foundational phase in my life. Wasn't a mega church by any means, but man, we filled it up on Sundays. If you got there late for service, you'd have to go sit in the balcony. It was almost like punishment because you wouldn't have an usher up there. They wouldn't give you the paper bulletin. And you just couldn't hear as well. And it was long before they ever had any sort of projection screen with the lyrics and stuff. So you'd have to go dig around to find a dusty hymnal in the corner of the balcony. But that was pretty rare because my folks sang in the choir. And so we'd always end up getting there very early, and we'd be causing trouble running amok around the church. So it was just awesome. I remember like lock-ins with the youth group growing up. There was this cemetery in the back of the church, which we called the graveyard because that sounds way scarier. But lock-ins were it was a wild time of life. There was.
I don't think they do those anymore. Like any church. They
do. Well, so my daughter just had a lock-in. She actually didn't go. She's going to hear this and feel bad that we didn't let her go. But it was, they definitely locked it in. But it was like 40 parents or 50 parents that were there, and there was 300 kids, and it was just going to be a lot. And it's a huge building, and so I don't know. We pulled the ripcord on that one, and she can go next year. But our church was kind of like the biggest our youth group probably was at any given time was 15, 20 kids. But we were tight. And I think what made us really strong in our bond was because we came from all different schools. And so we could come and be our genuine self amongst this like melting pot of all these schools, as opposed to when you come from the people in school, like, okay, that guy's the jock, this guy's the cool kid, this person's the smart person, that person's all they do is sing or they're in theater, and you all have your little cliques. This was like, leave all that at the door, come to youth group, we're all here for the same reason. And so that was kind of the starting point for me. We got introduced in that youth group to this church camp. This is kind of a second phase of my faith. And through this church camp experience, it was youth groups from all over Minnesota descended on this little town called Spicer, Minnesota. It was right outside of that town is a camp called Decision Hills Camp. And I think it was, I don't know, must have been 30 different youth groups, small different churches, from all over. And it's just amazing. I mean, it was a bunch of fun summer camp stuff too, but it was just amazing to share in your faith with so many people and like get to know them so quickly. The relationships just went from like 0 to 60, where you'd like know these people and become lifelong friends from having spent 1 week during a summer together.
That's part of my testimony is Deep Valley Christian Service Camp. And I'm actually, a board member now of that camp because,
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So when you start saying like youth group and church, dude, that resonates with me because that's exactly my getting involved in a youth group. We were all tight, all come from different walks. And then we all would go to church camp together. And then that's where like the real deep stuff would happen. And so,
yeah. Amazing. So yeah, you know exactly where I'm coming from. And after, you know, going for years as a camper, my favorite memories there was going back as a counselor.
Yes.
Back as what they called a junior counselor for a few years. Then there's a mandatory year off to kind of give some space and you come back as a senior counselor. And coming back and leading my own small group of campers as a senior counselor. It was just truly amazing to be able to usher kids through what I went through as well. And to have been there and, you know, gone through that walk as well. And, kind of give back. That was awesome. And then of course, all my friends are the other senior counselors and stuff too. And so it's just really impactful on my faith. So one I'm remembering right now, kind of one memory from that. And that was, we do this thing called Quest during camp. This camp isn't around anymore. So I'm really like blast from the past in my memory here, but did this thing called Quest. It was basically Stations of the Cross. And you would go with your small group that you'd spend all week bonding with and like going through all the deep, you know, tumultuous stuff of life and sharing all these, you know, horrific and wonderful and, you know, hurting hearts would just share with each other with complete strangers. You get to know each other real quickly. Near the end of the camp experience, we would do this thing Quest. And it was this contemplative time of quiet, a little bit of sharing, a lot of self-reflection, a lot of prayer, and you carry a giant wooden cross with your small group from station to station. And these stations were kind of a long walk at times. It was all throughout this huge camp, probably, you know, 60 acres or so. And so there's a lot of just walking in silence between each stations. One of the stations I was, me and my best friend Alex were waist deep in the water of St. George at sunset. And we did what's called remembering your baptism. And I know it's a hot topic, but growing up Methodist, we believe in infant baptism. And so I know there's a whole lot of debate around, you know, all of that. But this was almost considered like, you know, you don't remember it as an infant, obviously. This is what you remember. And so this was kind of a rebaptizing of all of these kids that were all infant baptized and talking about what it meant earlier that day and kind of talking through it and what baptism means to us and things like that. And then me and Alex were full immersion baptizing every single person at that camp. And it was, there's tears and there's laughter and there was, I feel like it was like a perpetual sunset in my memory. I'm sure it was not always sunset during this like hour and a half or 2 hours that we were doing this, but my memory is just the sun hitting that at an angle across this calm water in this lake. And that was epic. So that kind of embodies for me, my memory of that whole many years experience at this church camp. But that was pretty great. So that from there, I was actually a youth pastor after my time as like a counselor at this camp. So for a hot minute, I was a youth pastor a few towns over. And I did that for a while. We ended up taking a big road trip to a national youth conference in Tennessee. And that was amazing. It was called like Yummies. And it was a United Methodist youth group from all over the nation. But that was like a week-long thing. That was really cool. That time of life, though, and I won't get into a bunch of details here, but it was kind of the start of, this is my early 20s. I'm mid 40s now. And that was kind of a hard time of life for me. I was broke as a joke. My car broke down, and that kicked off about 3 years of not having a car. And so I couldn't get to my youth group job, and that wasn't paying the bills anyway. That was just a volunteer thing. But so that was like the first thing I had to go because I couldn't even get there. And then, man, that was just like it was a strange time of life. I think my friends and stuff and family probably didn't see it in the moment, just because I was pretty good at hiding it. But I think there was it was like a deep, long era of depression and drinking, a whole lot of beer. And I say they wouldn't notice in the moments because I would turn it on and, hide away any sadness, like be the life of the party and feel the need or the pressure to kind of show up in any social situation. And I've always just been kind of really good at that. And it wasn't fake. Like I'm probably having fun in that moment, but behind the scenes, I'm like, what am I doing in my life? Like, I don't know what's going on here. And there's, any time of being alone or in my own thoughts was just kind of like, I was depressed. I didn't know what I was doing. And I was working these junk jobs, wasn't making any money, didn't really feel I was deserving of making any money or doing anything with my life. And I was like, I was really rudderless, which, I had no direction. So even if the wind did blow in a certain direction, I wasn't able to capitalize on those opportunities. And so that sort of like was a down period in my faith. I didn't lose my faith. I still had a good prayer life, but man, if I wasn't trying to convince myself that there wasn't a responsibility tied to my faith, that was something I didn't notice at that time. I sort of felt, okay, yeah, there's a God, but what's my purpose? I don't really have a purpose, or I'm not on God's radar, or, nothing really matters. It was like this tinge of nihilism in my faith walk at that time. And that was a dark time. And then this is a much longer story, but I ended up quitting drinking. A spark was given to me when my dad quit drinking. And I didn't take that as like, oh, that's a great idea. I took that as an affront to my entire lifestyle and who I was as a person. And I was very defensive about it. And it took me about 5 years, maybe 6 years before I quit drinking. Okay. But what it did was it struck a chord in me when my dad quit drinking of, well, I didn't think he had a problem. I didn't think, I drink more than he does. And if he quit drinking because he thought that was a better way of life for him, then what does that mean for me? And also, if I look through every other aspect of my life, he's been a guidepost for me in terms of my faith, in terms of my finances, in terms of how he treats my mother and how he raises our family. If he's a guidepost for me in every aspect of my life, then if he comes down with this type of decision for his own life, wouldn't that mean that is a good decision for me as well? And that really wrung me out. Like I didn't know what to do with that type of information, and kind of got pissed off, not at him, just didn't really understand what I was supposed to do. So that kicked off at least an understanding that I have a messed up relationship with alcohol and what it might mean for my life. And it took me years to battle this realization that I have this weird relationship with alcohol. And ended up meeting my wife, who got married, had my first baby girl in 2012. And when she was 6 months old, we had gone out that night. My folks were actually babysitting. And I just tied one on, it was a Frank the Tank by accident. And, thankfully nobody got hurt. Nobody, it was like, but I woke up the next morning and I was just the most hungover I've ever been. And that thought of like, oh my gosh, I'm never drinking again, that we all say the morning after, it was like, well, what if you didn't? What would your life look like then? And, I stayed up late that night and journaled about it and prayed about it. My dad had given me this book by Alan Carr called The Easy Way to Quit Drinking, which is a stupid name for a book for someone that doesn't think they should quit drinking. But other than that, as I'm reading through this book, it's like, I'm sure you think this is a stupid book with a stupid name. And I'm like, what? How did it get out of my head? And I start going through these pages, and it's just, he is speaking to me truths that I had known deep down somewhere and had locked away. And as page after page, he is revealing to me these common sense things that I had always known. And he is just bringing that to my awareness. It wasn't some scientific mumbo jumbo. It wasn't some psychological trick. He was just talking to me straight about, he'd be like, Michael, I'm sure you're surprised that this is just common sense stuff. And I'm like, what? How are you reading my mind? He's like, I'm sure you're thinking I'm reading your mind right now, but it's really just about X, Y, Z. And I was like, this is insane. So I just rifled through that book. And I would like to say that changed my life, but I was already there. I just needed somebody to say it to me. And, that opened up the ability to talk to my dad about it, so that there was some healing that I think we had a fine time over that 5 years or whatever, but I certainly wasn't talking to him about his decision to quit drinking. That's just something I postponed for 5 years there until I could really understand the language in which I should approach that conversation. And that I share that not because like that changed my life. I mean, I wasn't, and I'm not, I feel like folks that like I've seen friends that have really gone through alcoholism, and I don't mean to say it lightly that I wasn't in that situation. I just happened to know that like I never woke up in the morning like my hands were shaking and I needed a drink, or like drank it in secret or anything like that. It wasn't that type of relationship. It was just I realized my life would be better without it. And also I realized that I didn't necessarily have huge regrets, but there was all these little micro regrets from days that I would drink, or how I'd feel the next day, or drink too much and maybe like, won't cancel something because it just wasn't feeling good, or like maybe I was a little too much the life of the party and wasn't a good listener to that one person that I could have been forging a relationship with, or just credibility in general is a big thing for me. So if I was to have a really deep conversation with somebody and they're about to open up to me, or maybe they're looking back on the memory of that conversation, they would think, oh, was he drinking that night? I wonder, were his intentions or compassion in that moment, or his listening ear, or when his eyes got misty when I shared that, was that because he was drinking? And that's just this chip away at your credibility that always bothered me. Like you can't necessarily trust exactly who someone is if you don't know if they've had a sip or they haven't had a sip. And if I approach the world now in a 100% sober minded, not drinking a sip of anything, then any new relationship I have in any situation I'm in, people will never ask themselves that of, can I trust this person? Can I approach them? Are they trustworthy? What version of this person is showing up in this moment? Why is that occurring? It's just always me. And so being able to be credible in every situation was one of the most important reasons why I just decided to quit.
That's interesting. So, part of my background is my mom was an alcoholic. I don't drink. I don't drink in public. And if I ever have had a drink, it's with my wife at night. But it's like, I can count on one hand in our almost 10 years of marriage that I've done that. Right. And so, but, it's funny how everybody's decisions or the reason is different. I've actually never heard somebody come at it from a perspective like you just did, in the sense of the credibility side. Like, if you're going to have a conversation with somebody, if they're questioning whether or not you're sober minded and understand the relationship at hand, and if you don't drink, you don't have to worry. I've never that's awesome. I love that aspect of how you discern that.
Yeah, it was, and I guess it probably didn't dawn on me right away, but I was actually talking to a guy that knew me kind of only in party mode. He was a friend of a friend. And I ended up reconnecting with him at an insurance conference of all things. And sitting down with him for breakfast, he had never probably seen a whole lot of me without drinking, just because we would be seeing each other in social situations where it was some party or something, and that's when we'd bump into each other. So he probably had only known me, half in the bag. and we had a lot of fun together back in the day, but he was kind of sharing, after learning that I had quit drinking, he was kind of sharing that he sort of had this apprehension at times when he would know that I was going to be there, me specifically as an individual, because I had a way of like pushing everyone else to drink as much as I am, or like trying to keep up, or like, you know, like let's bring this party to another level type of thing. And so, you know, and he would come to these engagements and be like, oh, it's going to be that kind of party. Oliver's going to be there. Oh, okay. And there was kind of like, yeah, okay, it's probably going to be a good time. But like in the back of his mind, there's this apprehension. And that struck me because one, I kind of hurt because we could have been having, you know, much better conversations and much better relationship over the years. As opposed to short-term games of this super fun party, long-term gains of these really, you know, deeper relationships. But I also, it resonated with me because I would have these apprehensions about the evenings in which I knew I'd be drinking a lot, of like, who am I going to be when I show up? You know, who am I going to like break something at this person's house, or like, you know, run from the cops? Because, you know, who knows? I didn't get in a whole lot of trouble, but there are some stupid things that I've done.
You know, it's interesting. So this past Friday, my work had a bowling fundraiser. So in Erie, Pennsylvania, bowling is a huge sport. In the wintertime, bowling's like 10 months out of the year. I mean, it's just insane.
It's like ice fishing for us.
Right. Yeah. And so we had a big bowling fundraiser, and everybody met up at this bar for like a pregame thing. Now, everybody knows I don't drink, and I'm not going to drink, and that's just not part of who I am. But I wanted to go to the bar just to see some of the guys I work with and hang out with them. And so I went, and it was just a weird atmosphere. Like, okay, this is, you know, I don't understand this. And then go to the bowling alley, and then there's alcohol there, and everybody's drinking, and it's whatever. You know, we had a good time, and I bowled 232, and I felt good about that. Right.
I feel good about that for you.
Well, I bowled in the league for several years, and so yeah. But anyways, long story short, I'm talking to a guy at work yesterday, which was Monday, and I was telling him about, yeah, you know, it was really it was really fun Friday, and he in the last couple years gave up drinking because of alcoholism, because he had a lot of issues in that area. And he's like, you know, I've been bowling for, you know, 15 years, and it's really strange watching from the other side. He's like, I was always the guy that was drinking and hooting and hollering and being crazy. He's like, and to see it from the other side, I wonder, why was I such an idiot? Why did I do that? And it was interesting. A non-Christian recognize the influence that he was having on people when he was drinking, and how it was just, the conversation was almost like surreal to me. Like, man, you're recognizing things about you. And he was just saying like, yeah, I didn't like who I was, and I didn't realize who I was until I saw people who were like me after I didn't do it.
Yeah. It's tough. And I always tell people, like, it was truly just a personal decision. Like, it was such a very personal and unique decision, and a unique challenge that I was faced with over years and years and years. It was a very slow played decision. It didn't hit me like a strike of lightning at all. I mean, when I quit cold turkey, but it had been a long time coming, for years, where I was kind of being led in this direction. But everything just kind of came into better focus for me. So it was like better sleep, better conversations, no headaches. My finances got better. We got deep into the Dave Ramsey Financial Peace University at that time. And it's much easier to budget when you're not imbibing at a bar with a bunch of friends thinking, who cares? Let's just spend another round. Let's get something else. Let's do this. Let's go out to that. You know, like when you're out and you're broke and you're like got a baby at home and you're newly married, like that's gross negligence right there, to just go blow your budget on a night out of drinking because it makes sense at the time. You know, it's not like something that you woke up in the morning, you're like, I'm going to spend $200 at the bar tonight and I'm going to buy rounds for everybody and we're going to get 3 pizzas afterwards and it's going to be great. And I'm going to do that to my family. You're not thinking that, but in the time it makes sense. So anyway, big impact on, I just think better version of myself all around. Like, you know, I'm a stronger player. Like I'm a better husband. I'm a better father. I can say that with confidence. I'm a better friend. I'm a better version of myself in all the roles that I'm asked to be in when I'm not drinking. And I don't say that in a way of like boasting. I just say it because it's just common sense. Like if you don't know what you're going to get at any given moment, you can't trust me as much with certain aspects because I might get drunk and make a different decision. That's unpredictable, and unpredictable is another word from saying, not trustworthy. Like you can't predict someone's outcome. You can't trust their outcome. And it all comes down to that trust for me. So, it's just that's enough about that, but it does lead into kind of the next phase of my faith, which was, kind of some massive growth in around 2020. I think it was 2020 because it was during COVID. I guess let me fast forward through that whole part. So like my daughter was 6 months old at that time in 2012. So like 8 years now up until 2020, like life is good. We went through, we took our lumps here and there. Drinking wasn't an issue at that point. Like I get to now raise my kids without ever having a hangover, which if you've ever tried to like get a baby to stop crying while you're hungover at 2 a.m, like that's the absolute worst thing in the world. And I thankfully like just unsubscribed from that and never had to deal with that again. The crying part I had to deal with, but not the being hungover part. So next big massive phase of growth was kind of out of the blue. I journaled quite a bit, and I was up at night rifling through an old journal, probably trying to find a blank page, and I came across the same date as it was. I don't remember the exact date, but it was the same date that I was journaling. And I was like, oh, it was exactly 8 years earlier, and it was around the time that I had just quit drinking. So it was like, shortly after I had quit drinking, kind of this big moment in my life, those next few months. And it was a day that I was actually journaling that day, a day a coworker and I had gone out for coffee after this sales appointment. And we had sort of randomly realized that we're both, churchgoers and people of faith, and we shared our faith with one another and kind of started having a real conversation. And I had worked with this guy for, probably a year prior to that. And this was like our first like real get to know you, share your faith type of conversation. And I was like, oh, Scott, what is that guy up to? I hadn't talked to him, for years and years and years. This is an old journal entry that I'm reading. So I texted him at that moment and I was like, texted him what happened. And I was like, so I'm just thinking about you, man, praying for you and hope everything's doing well with your life. And just reached out to him randomly. So he responds back. And he's like, we should get together. And I was like, how about breakfast tomorrow morning? He's like, great. And so we met for breakfast. I remember we met at this cafe. It was outdoor on the patio. It was freezing cold, but they had all these heaters up and it was this big plastic bubble, as if that was going to change it. It probably made COVID worse because we were just all breathing the same air inside this big plastic bubble, but they wouldn't let anyone in the restaurant. So they put this big plastic tent outside and then heated it. So you're still inside. It was so bizarre. What a weird time of life. So we were out there and we're chatting, and it came to light that because he's catching up with me, like what's been going on the last 8 years, and so kind of something similar to this, and sharing with him, and he's like, wait, you quit drinking? I didn't know that. I was like, you didn't? We weren't working together at that time. He's like, no, that must have been right after we stopped working together. I'm like, crazy, yeah. And I'm like, this is not about me. And he's like, no, I want to hear that story. So we kind of walk through it. And he is brought to tears and he says, I'm so sorry. I'm making this about me. I'm hearing your story, but I'm thinking about me, and I'm like, let's have it. Like I don't want to hear myself talk. I've already heard this story. Like, what's on your heart? And he starts sharing with me his own journey with addiction over the last few years, a few years prior to that, and the struggles with his family, and how he was kind of just coming out of it and seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and how he's in a really good spot now. But man, that hit him like a ton of bricks to hear. He said I was the second person in 2 days to tell him that they had quit drinking, and he just got hit like a Mack truck. That was, as he put it, like I here I am thinking I'm coming out of this tunnel of addiction, of these other addictions, but yet I'm still drinking. And I hear this twice in the next 2 days, and it kind of dawned on him, like maybe my journey isn't done, or maybe I haven't. Maybe I'm thinking, I'm being proud of my journey and having be wrapped up in a nice little bow at this time of life, but maybe it's actually feels heavier than that. That maybe there are other things I need to shine a light on. So that was really interesting, and I don't mean to go down that rabbit hole. Other than that night, I rarely ever dream. It just, my wife dreams all the time. She remembers them. They're always super crazy dreams, like Smurfs running around with Nerf guns and Lord knows what else. Like, she'll wake up and tell us all about it, and it's always a riot to hear her dreams. But I never remember any dreams. Very rarely, I should say. So this night I had a very lucid dream where there's a whole bunch of people around. You know how dreams are. It's like you don't really know. In the memory of it, you're like, I don't know what that was. It was maybe a party. I don't know. And so there's a whole bunch of people around. I actually recognized a few of the people from like different walks of life that were, incongruent to one another. And there was this theme of either someone there was like a addiction counselor, or I myself was an addiction counselor, which for the record, I have never been, and I'm not now. And it was like, but that was either it was being talked about maybe. And there was this guy in the dream talking to this gal, and who I recognized. I didn't know his name. And then, so I wake up and I was like, boy, that was weird. I don't know what that was all about. Maybe it was that meeting I had with my buddy over breakfast that sort of like triggered this weird fever dream. So I kind of put it aside. And a couple days later, for some reason, I just cannot get this dream out of my head. And I keep playing it back over in my mind. And I'm like, this is weird. Why am I even thinking about this? It's just a bizarre dream. And for some reason, there's this guy in the dream that I recognize, and I can't think of his name. And that's what starts to bother me. And now I'm like a week in, and I'm trying to figure out this dude's name. And I feel like there's something there, like I'm supposed to go figure that out. And I don't even know where to start. And the guy the gal he's talking to, it dawns on me after about a week that I'm like, I think they dated, and I think I worked with her at Doolittle's Air Cafe in high school and like 1999. And I think her name is Crystal. And I think my buddy Mitch, who also used to work there, may have known her better. So I reach out to Mitch, and he was in my youth group growing up. And so I was like, hey, I had this crazy dream. Don't mean to give you all the details, but I kind of feel like it's important. I need to figure out who was she dating at that time, or who she's talking to this guy. And I tried to describe him. And so we're going back and forth, and he's like Steve, and he says the last name too. And I'm like, that is it. That's his name. That's amazing. That's who that guy. I had a dream about that random character in my life who happened to be dating. And he goes, yeah, they ended up getting married. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. He's like, I was at their wedding. And I was like, this is nuts. Somehow I'm supposed to, and I didn't know this until this moment, but as I'm talking to my buddy Mitch, I'm like, I'm supposed to reach out to Steve. And he's like, he immediately starts laughing, and he says, okay, well, tell him Jesus told you to call him when you reach out to him. He's making fun of me. And I'm like, how on earth would I ever get a hold of that guy? I'm like, is he on Facebook? Is he on, like, I don't even know where to begin. And so then Mitch calls me later, or to maybe text me, and he's like, you won't believe it, but my daughter was playing with my old flip phone, my old Razor flip phone that I had back in the day that's in like electronics box in our basement. And we just kept it around and we plugged it in with an old, mammoth side USB plug and plugged this thing in. And I thought of you because I worked at, with those guys at that time. And what do you know? Here's a number I have for Steve in the phone. And I was like, yeah, there's no way that's the same number. So anyway, I had a good laugh. Like another week goes by, try to put this out of my mind. And then I was driving, delivering Meals on Wheels over lunch on a Friday. And I was listening to it wasn't podcast. It was like Book on Tape. And the guy on the Book on Tape, totally unrelated. I'm not even listening to what he's saying, but what catches my ear at that moment is basically, paraphrasing, is something like, why are you scared to go do the thing that you have to do, that you need to do, that God is calling you to do? Why are you scared to do it? The worst thing that could possibly happen is that a human thinks you're stupid for it. But if God's telling you to do it, then just let that reward happen later, and you know that you've done what you're supposed to do. And it was like, whoa, it was just a cricket bat to the face. And so I pulled over into an empty lot and just pull up that number, and I'm like, okay, well, I don't know where to begin here. So I prayed about it, and I was like, well, there's no way this is even the right number. Maybe I'll text him. So I text this number, and I was like, oh no, he's not gonna. I said, is this Steve friend, or is this Steve? And and said his last name too. And then he doesn't respond. And I'm like, well, would I, if I got a text like that? And I'm like, all right, I'll just tell him a little bit more. And I'm like, this is Mike Oliver. We worked together at Doolittle's, or I worked with Crystal at Doolittle's, who I think you were dating at that time, or I don't know what I said. He responds back immediately and is like, dude, how did you even get this number? Yeah, this is Steve. What's going on, man? And I go, do you have time for a phone call for a crazy story? And he's like, yeah. And so I call him up. And he's kind of chuckling and I'm chuckling. And I basically shared a very truncated version of what I just shared with you guys. And then I just left it. I kind of just said, so I felt like I needed to reach out to you, but I don't know why. And then he's totally silent on his end. And he says, kind of choked up, and he says, I know exactly why you were supposed to call me. And he goes on to describe that he had married Crystal. They had gotten a divorce, he had gone through some really tough times in life, turned to drugs and alcohol and anything he could find, was really torn apart by drugs and addiction for years and years and years. Been in and out of treatment a number of times. His parents were at their wits' end. And he had gotten clean. And was kind of like riding this high of this new life, and had a great girlfriend, and she had a young son. And he was kind of like, getting to know him and starting a life together with this gal, and they were living together, and he had a good job and things were good. And for whatever reason, it dawned on him one day that, wow, life is really good, and I'm in a really good spot, and I'm responsible, and I got a job, and I got some money, and everything's good. Wouldn't this be better now to do drugs now because I got it all together? And it's just a funny thing how addiction can get its claws in you so deeply that even once you've kicked it, you can maybe even justify it when you're not at rock bottom. You're at the mountaintop, and it can convince you in a way you'd never see coming. And so for some reason he thought, okay, I got it all together now. Wouldn't it be even better if I was high? And so he started using again. And this was over the course of just days earlier. And I've heard this from others, and I actually had a buddy who passed away from an overdose from a very similar situation, where he was clean for a really long time and started using again. The level that you, and I don't know much about this stuff, but the levels that you had tolerance for and your body was accustomed to when you were a heavy user, if you are clean for a long stretch of time and you start using again, you don't really know what you're supposed to use. So you use what you did before, and that's what can kill you, because your body is just shocked by going from a clean state to this heavy usage that you don't have tolerance for, and that can stop your heart or stroke out your mind or any number of horrible things. So he started using again and completely overdosed and was out of his mind, like a lunatic. And thankfully his girlfriend was, came home or found him or what have you. He doesn't remember any of this, but, kicking and screaming and just out of his mind, just like probably had to be handcuffed. Like they ended up getting the ambulance out and everything. Like he needed to be hospitalized. So he's sharing with me that that had just happened, and then she left him, and he was sitting over a bowl of Cheerios, looking into his Cheerios, thinking, well, this is stupid. Like, why am I even eating Cheerios if I'm just going to kill myself later? Why am I even thinking about sustenance and energy for my body when I'm probably just going to end all of this? And then his phone rang, and it's a guy who said, I had a dream about you, and it was about drug addiction, and I'm not sure why I called you. And so on that phone, it wasn't a terribly long conversation, maybe a half hour, but it was, we were just kind of at this standstill of like, I don't know what's going on here, Steve, but I know that God has a purpose for your life. Like this was meant to happen on the day it was meant to happen, and not a day earlier, not a day later. Like, and I am just like, my strings are just being pulled left and right through this. I don't know what I'm doing. This is new territory for me. And it was just such a miracle. It was just an unbelievable miracle with no other potential definition for it. And it kicked off a really great relationship. I was doing a Bible study with a few buddies because he couldn't go inside anywhere. We were doing it on walks. We would go on hiking trails throughout the area. And that's what I had been doing multiple times a week. I was also trying to train for the Tahoe Rim Trail. As a different story, but I'd be like wearing a heavy backpack while we did this and doing Bible studies and stuff. So I'd been doing that already. And so that was always on the top of my mind of like, if I'm trying to connect with someone, I'm going to go for a hike with them. Like that was the only thing I knew how to do at that time. So I was like, we got to go for a hike. And he's like, a what? And I was like, we're going hiking tomorrow morning, and you're going to meet me at 5 a.m. And he's like, are you kidding? And I'm like, yep. So for next, I think it was like just about every Saturday at gruesome hours of the morning, we'd go out to this, like, we didn't always do the long, like 10, 12 milers, but there's this huge acreage of wooded, hilly hiking trails that was kind of equidistant to where he was living and where I was living. And every Saturday we'd go out there for typically 3-4 hours. And then there'd be phone calls or texts during the week and stuff too. And it was just such a wonderful moment where for the first time ever, I was like this really emboldened counselor from my perspective, from my faith. Everything that I had gone through in my relationship with alcohol had all set itself up for being able to usher someone through something like this. Granted, I couldn't relate to all the things and all the struggles that he had gone through, but I was sound in my faith and sound in my decision to be sober. And that, couldn't be said for a lot of the other friends that he had in his life. They knew he was trying to be sober and stuff, but they weren't themselves sober. So you can't really lean on on that person during that time. So that was it was just such a huge kind of blossoming moment in my faith over those many months that we got together. I think for about a year there. And he relapsed at one point and got clean again. And he's in a really good spot now. He actually got back together with his girlfriend. They moved, he got a great job. He lives up north Minnesota now. Anyway, so I didn't mean for it to be about him. But it was just an immense breakthrough in my own faith from like having always been a believer, but not necessarily understanding what miracles are actually taking place and what is possible. And that gave me such a better perspective on the Bible in general. Some parts of the Bible are hard unless you really dig deep and understand the context. And some people aren't willing to go find that specific context. Or like, Will, you and I were talking before this podcast about, sometimes there's like the Greek or the Hebrew and just the being able to see the full notes from translators who speak multiple different languages. And like, once you dig deep like that, it's, to me, from like an analytical perspective, it's just super interesting to realize that it doesn't actually contradict itself anywhere. Like, it actually still points to truth, and that there is understanding through the archaeology and the anthropology and the language differences and the translations. And you can make sense of it. But for the most part, it's pretty easy to understand. Like, for the most part, the Bible is not a confusing place to be. Right. There's a few things that people, get hung up on. But for the most part, it's pretty easy when it says, love God with everything you got, and then love each other. And if you do those two things, the rest of everything that I'm commanding of you will fall into place. And I know that's like the Mike Oliver standard version, but it's pretty easy concepts. It's just really hard to live out. But seeing and experiencing miracles, and there's others. There's one crazy story that we don't have time for, but I can share with you offline at one point. But that it also changed my life and how I feel and how I live with another situation that I was in. But that's all kind of like part of this new phase of life where I'm realizing miracles are real, and you can't see them unless you're willing to take that leap of faith, that feeling inside you when you're like, I kind of feel like I'm supposed to do this. A lot of us ignore that. And I'm sure there's been thousands of times in my own life where I ignore that. You catch eyes with someone across the room and you feel it's in your gut. I'm making this up, but like you feel in your gut, like that person is hurting, or that, I should do something for that person, or I feel compelled to go hear that person's story. Most of the time, 1,000,000 to 1, you're going to ignore that feeling because you don't want to feel like a weirdo. And I bet if you had that feeling and you went through that situation, if you went and talked to that person, you would find out why after you do the doing. You know what I mean? Like, right. You don't need to, if you waited until you figured out exactly why or how or for what reason or how easy it's going to be or how good you'd feel later after you did it, it wouldn't be so hard. The fact that all those answers come after you decide to do it, to follow God's will in your life, that's when all of the answers come just rushing in. And for me, that kind of kicked off a new way of life or new perspective where I don't think of those things as like weird, what did I eat this morning? And that's why I feel funny in this situation. It's like, it's a prodding. It's a Holy Spirit working in your life. And I never really know why until I go do what I feel like I need to do. And then I find out why.
Absolutely.
And that is like answered so many prayers, and it has opened my eyes to the answer of prayers that I potentially wasn't looking for or wouldn't have realized. I've seen prayers answered in people's lives around me. I've seen numerous miracles happen that are just absolutely unexplainable in any other way than God's hand resting on that situation. So that's kind of like where I'm at in this phase of life, and it's been a crazy journey, but it's all led back to kind of this renewed love for the Word and for the Bible. And so I just kind of telling you guys this earlier, but I've got this group of guys that meets every Friday morning, and we go in a really slow pace through chapter by chapter through the entire Bible. We'll just pick a book and we just run with it. And sometimes one chapter ends up being stretched over 3 weeks, and we get into word studies and we get into topical studies, and we bounce around between, where it's hyperlinking out to other parts of scripture and what that means, and who the audience is within this letter or within this chapter, and what does it mean when they say that, and asking questions of each other, but then also praying for each other, and being able to lean on a group of guys who are all going through their own walks of life, and we all share a number of struggles, but then also have all of our own unique struggles in life too, and to have a sounding board and a solid prayer group to lean on. It's been the biggest blessing of my life, and such a great group of guys. So that's kind of where I'm at these days.
Man, so there's a couple of things I just want to note as I was listening to your story. One, God will and does use dreams. We don't always understand them. I mean, we see it in the Bible, right? Daniel was the master of this, as we would think. He could interpret dreams and all this kind of stuff, but he will use those moments, and it's a testament to actually following when you feel God prodding you and the Holy Spirit prodding you in a direction. And so kudos to you, because that's a hard thing to do, even for myself. I mean, there've been times where I've felt that and I haven't done anything, and then I wish I would have. And so that, and the second thing, you said something about that miracles were real. And I think that there's this, we don't have to get too theological, but there's this point in the Reformation movement where this term called cessationism started, to where they believe that miracles stopped with the apostles. But the way I read scriptures, I don't see that. And I see that we are given the power of the Holy Spirit in order to go lay hands and heal and pray for the sick and all this stuff. And I sense that you're experiencing some of that in your life. And I think that's amazing that you're seeing the Spirit move in that way, because so often we try to put limitations on God and thwart the Spirit, right? We try to say, well, I don't know, this doesn't feel like it can happen. I don't think this is real. This isn't something I believe God can do. And that's the furthest from the truth, isn't it? Yeah. Man, that's so good. And I was like, man, I'm gonna fly to Minnesota every Friday morning and be part of this Bible study, because I'm all about digging into the Word, line by line, verse by verse. So if you've listened to the podcast, the church that we attended in Tennessee was an expository teaching church. And so
wonderful.
That's what we did, is every week we go through whole books of the Bible, and we do a chapter a week. Sometimes they'd break it into 1 or 2 or 3 weeks if the chapter is long and we really deep. And so that's where my faith really took off, when I started digging into the Word in a way that I'd never done before, because I was never taught that. I was never raised in that. And so that's my third thing that I was thinking of as you're talking, is that you're being faithful to the Word, and the Spirit's being faithful to you through what you're experiencing, because you're taking the time to digest and ingest and really understand what it is that God's Word means. And I think that's so important. We tend to just read it for face value, but there's so much in it. And to your point, I don't believe that we serve a God of confusion. The only reason the Bible is confusing is because you're not reading it. And so if you just jump into the book of Revelation, you're going to think the Bible is crazy. But if you read the rest of the Bible and you understand what John is talking about in Revelation, and the types and the similes and the structure on what's happening, the apocalyptic structure of the book, then it all makes sense, right?
Sure.
And so it's only confusing if you're not actually reading it. And I don't think we serve a God of mystery. He reveals these things to us through the Holy Spirit, and that's when we're being faithful to him. So well done, sir. I love hearing it.
Yeah, thank you.
So, man, tell us how you got to become a maker. Tell us about 10,000 Makes and how your woodworking journey and all that came along.
Yeah, I think it really kicked off from probably similar to other folks as well, but it kicked off from the necessity from not having a bunch of money to do DIY projects in our first house. And so we moved into this, quaint little Rambler when we first got married. It was big to us. But once we had 3 kids piled in there, we were bursting at the seams. But when we moved into it, we didn't have 2 pennies to rub together outside of our mortgage payment. And so working through the Dave Ramsey stuff and like putting together our emergency fund and things like that, pretty soon our finances started to, we had enough to like save up and take on little projects here and there. So we started with the kitchen and basically gutted the thing, like knocked down a wall, ended up putting in a header. I've got a buddy who's in construction. And so he was able to like give us the oversight and consulting and help, for like, well, that's a weight bearing wall and here's what you would need to do. So like those types of things certainly came in handy. But, buying Ryobi, Sawzall and cutting a wall down, like that's the first time I've ever done anything like that. I think it was the first time I did any electrical. I put in a all new tile floor, and then the backsplash. I had never done tiling before. Borrowed a tile saw from someone, and like just everything. It was like the dawn of YouTube. But even then, and I remember some of the videos that I was watching back then, I would never make it 5 seconds into it. Now we're all so spoiled with like the production value that people bring to their YouTube channels. And it's so much shorter. It was back then, it was like, somebody's camcorder that they had set up and you could barely hear them. And it was all kind of grainy and blurry, but they get you through that project eventually after you watch it for an hour. But going through that whole kitchen project, and then we turned to, we painted every inch of that whole house, and then building shelves and, amassing tools like you do. It was always like, well, I'll need to do this project and I'll need this specific tool. So for every project, there was like a tool expense in it of like that one tool that you would have to be able to do this project. And whether or not you had to have that tool, it was like, I would make sure to earmark into the project budget. So very early on, the tool obsession kicked off, and I had this little 10-inch tabletop Craftsman. I feel like it was plastic, but maybe it was just the base of it that was plastic, but I feel like the whole thing was pretty plasticky. Just a crummy table saw, and I think it was less than $100. But man, I put that thing through its paces. I made this we kept the base of this kitchen table, but I remade the base of it. I had like 2 pipe clamps. I didn't have a joiner. I had this, this one little table saw, and I bought dimensional oak from Home Depot. So it's all just complete ribbon waves, and, glued it up, no fancy joiner or anything, just like flat end to end through the glue. And I probably used Kids Elmer glue and through on 2 pipe clamps on this thing, built this tabletop, hid my screws because I screwed it straight into the decking of the table. And then I like bored out the top of the screws and put a dowel in there. And like, so that was my way of hiding the screws. But man, that thing was a workhorse, and that was our kitchen table. It looked nice. But it was just like the ugliest way to build it. And that was like my first real project. That is still my assembly bench in my shop today. So that's gone 3 houses with us. And I've since put a vise on the side of this thing. That was our old kitchen table. There's a vise on the side of this thing. And then I drilled dog holes into the side of it. But that thing, I've never refinished it or anything. It's just now my assembly table. So a lot of really cool, really good memories. My workshop was the laundry room of that house. And I didn't have any dust collection, and it was just gnarly. I think I used like a bandana for covering my face for dust. And then I would just like try not to breathe while I was cutting. And then I would leave the room for a little bit to like let it settle, and then come in there and sweep and then make another cut. I had a handsaw instead of a chop saw for many years. So it was tough, but then eventually you get, more and more tools. And then when we moved, our kids were old enough to like start into the school district, and we wanted a better school district. So that's why we ended up moving. And then we also ended up getting a bigger house. We were thankful. We moved outside of the city far enough that we could afford a bigger house and get like the 3-car garage. So we sort of got this like awesome house. We thought it was our forever house, but again, that's another long story. We ended up moving again, but it was a third stall garage. So I sort of claimed that third stall, like, hey, we don't have 3 cars, but I could build a workshop in there. And so then that sort of took off. And so for, I think maybe the last 7 or 8 years, I've been like super serious about having a shop and building things. And I'd never sold a thing in my life. It was just like 75% of the furniture in my house and stuff that I've built, and then a lot of stuff given away, and, Christmas presents and a whole bunch of cutting boards. And then when was it? Probably a year and a half ago, I got a wild hair to start this LLC because my wife bought me for my birthday a GoPro camera. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. What am I going to use this for? And she goes, you have to start a YouTube channel with it. And I think she just kind of secretly knew, especially because I'd been watching so much YouTube. Like if I was going to start a project, I would veg out on the couch watching YouTube night after night about those types of projects, about how, and just learning. And I felt like I went to YouTube University for years there.
Yes.
And so she would know what project I was about to start because I'd have weeks of YouTube like classes that I would be watching. And the kids would sit down with me and watch it. And so she got me this GoPro camera, which is so funny because now I use my cell phone. Like the cell phone just is so much better for me and how I utilize it and how I film stuff now. And the cameras are so much better. But at the time I was like, oh, you've got to have all this fancy equipment. So I kind of kicked off the YouTube channel, and then that turned into like a lot of time and attention to Instagram. And then both of those kind of juggling back and forth. And then I was like, if I'm going to start doing videos, that means like I'll be marketing myself. So I might as well start an LLC. And then the second you do that, people just come out of the woodwork with paid projects that they want your help on, that they potentially weren't going to ask you because they don't want to bother you to have to go do something for free. But if they're paying you, they're like, good, I will ask you then. And so there was a lot of demand out there that I had no idea about. And so I've been busier than I can keep up with. Just because it is still a side gig for me, and I don't have a ton of. At this point, it's sad to hear, gentlemen, but it's probably only 2 hours a week in the shop for me right now.
I wish I had 2 hours a week in the shop.
Yeah, and last weekend it wasn't, but on average, I bet it's 2 hours a week in the shop. But it used to, there was a run there where I was in the shop 12 hours a weekend, type of thing. So it's definitely calmed down quite a bit, and we are ramping up into, making sure that we're ferrying the kids around to the sport du jour, and, work is picked up. And so there's a lot of other things pushing and pulling the demand and attention.
So
But
what does your shop look like now? Is it you're a different house now? So are you in a
different house now? And it's actually, I tried to keep as much of the same layout as possible, just because it's like still a single car garage shop for me. And so I've got my stall of the garage, and I sort of have the layout pretty similar to my last shop. We redid the kitchen in this house. So all the old cabinets, when we moved into this house, all the old cabinets we pulled out, and they weren't super nice cabinets, but I made sure to pull them out gently. And because I used, I bet, 90% of them in the shop now. And so I put all of those down against one wall. I've got the uppers and the lowers, and then I separate them where the stove would go, type of thing. That's where I have my chop saw. So I just built in my chop saw stand, and then I can run boards across that countertop right there. And then my chop saw is in the middle of it and sinks down, so it's all flush. So that's great. And then I sold my motorcycle, brings a tear to my eye, but I sold my motorcycle for a saw stop. Yes. So that was a vast swing of de-risking. It went from the death-defying rides on the motorcycle, and
saw you can't cut yourself on
when you fall on your motorcycle, and ended up selling that, and then investing in a table saw that also totally de-risks and is a safety item.
Which saw did you go with?
What is it called? It's the professional cabinet, and it's the 3 horsepower.
I have the 175.
Yeah, it's absolutely the best workhorse in my shop. That thing's awesome. I mean, I would pay that amount of money just for the fence. The fence is so sturdy and so accurate, and perfectly slides back and forth, and the tape rule on the front that you're sliding out. I never have to my old saw used to have to double check against the fence and make sure that the fence is in line. I trust that thing with my life to cut exactly where I want it to. So that thing's awesome.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. It's funny because, I always talk about my woodworking started in a shed. It actually started. So our first house we bought, there was a 1-car garage that at some point, that house was built in 1958. It's like a ranch, and they converted it into a laundry room and then this weird bonus room. And so it was this laundry utility room and then the bonus room. And so the bonus room I had used that's where my tools were at.
That is a bonus.
Right. But it was really small. It was 9 by 10 or something like that. And then in the laundry room, I took one of the walls and put a woodworking bench, like a hand tool bench in there. And so it was this tandem thing. Well, it was creating so much dust. It was just bad. And I'm also a drummer. I've been playing drums for.
Oh, me too, man. I got drums in the basement.
Yeah, I've been playing for awesome. Better part of 20 plus years. And when we got pregnant with our first son, I have a Roland V drum set, and it was in where the nursery was going to be. And so we're like, well, I've got to be able to put my drum set somewhere, but we need the nursery. And so we took that bonus type room, and we ripped out these old cabinets that were in there, put all new cabinets in, put new floor down, painted it, did the whole thing, and put my drums in there. And that kind of became an actual bonus room, kind of craft / bonus room. And
I went electric when the kids were little, because I could never play, because someone was always sleeping, or it was just way too loud for the kids when they're young. So I went electric, and I just hate it. I can't wait to go back to acoustic someday.
Oh, really? What do you have now?
What is it called? The Alesu or whatever they are.
Alesis?
Yeah, Alesis.
Yep.
So that's they're awesome. All right. It just doesn't actuate at the exact same time.
Oh, yeah.
There's either a slight delay, or it's a miss, or it doesn't get the nuances of if you're playing soft, you're playing hard, or you're crashing in.
So I actually went down a path. I have a Roland, and then 3-4 years ago, I went and I bought. Alesis came out with the flagship. It was like $3,500 or something, and I went and I bought that, and I took it back after a week because it didn't trigger as well as the $1,000 Roland.
Oh,
And so so
I bought a cheaper Alesis, or however you say it,
right.
because it wasn't that expensive, but I'm having those same problems. Like, it just doesn't.
Yeah, if you played a Roland, it would be game changing. Just from a Roland has the market on triggering and sensors, and there's no delay. It's a different world. Now, Alesis did just come out with the new Strata Prime set, and from what I'm hearing, it rivals Roland. But yeah. So, anyways, when we converted.
Well, when you come out to Minnesota, then we're going jam session and then Bible study.
There you go. I like it. So we converted that room into the drum bonus craft room, and when we did that, I was like, oh, what am I do with my shop stuff? And so it went out to the shed, and then I'd pull everything out into the garage, out of the driveway to woodwork and stuff like that. But then our second house had a 2-car garage, nice size garage, and my wife was gracious enough to give me the garage for a shop. And so I had a full 2-car garage with I had a 4x8 assembly table. I had a 4x8 assembly table, and then I had my outfeed with my table saw, and I had the whole thing. And then we moved here back to Pennsylvania, and I've got a 1-car garage now. That is fine. I don't give as much time out in the shop as I used to, which is okay with me. I'm out there when I need to be, and every once in a while I get to make a project and have some fun. So, but yeah, it's funny, Michael, is that we interview a ton of people on the podcast. I'd say 95%, Tom, would you say, is they start woodworking because it's either because you buy a house and you're poor and you need to fix stuff, or your dad was a woodworker.
Yep. I would say 95% of it is you bought a house, you ain't got no money. That's how most of us started.
Right.
Yeah. You got to make do. The wife wants a project done, and you got to figure out how to do it.
Or the wife goes to the store and wants something. You're like, that price is ridiculous. I can make that.
Nope. And you end up paying twice as much to build it.
She'll find like a little shelf or a knick-knacky thing that she's going to hang on the wall, and it's made of wood. And like immediately, the kids are so smart to this now too. They're like, "Oh, Dad's going to be mad," but she knows and is wise enough that yes, I could make it, but I'll need 6 months and
a new tool.
And a new tool, and then maybe I'm going to over-engineer it, and also the cost of the wood will be 8 times as much as what she bought at TJ Maxx.
Yeah. Right, that's funny.
And so she'll just come home and be like, "It's made of wood, and I don't want to hear it, and I have it, and it's done, and I didn't need to ask you to do it, and it's on the wall." So,
it's funny. One of my first projects, the kitchen we had at our first house. It was small. It was nice, granite countertops and a whole really nice updated, but there wasn't a lot of counter space. And so I made a rolling kitchen island.
Oh, sure.
Just a little, I mean, it wasn't but 24 by 36 or something. Like, it wasn't very big, but I made it the same height as the counter, and the whole base was built out of.
It was your first outfeed table.
Right. 4x4 legs with poplar slats for shelves, and it was all painted. And then it was a white oak top that matched our white oak floors with the same stain and everything on it. And it was fine. It was nice. It looked nice. It was good, whatever. And it's one of the things that the people asked if we could stay in the house when we sold the house. They're like, we were like that island. I'm like, oh, sure, whatever. It was like my first ever project, and awesome. Yeah, it was kind of funny. But
your first sold project was with a house.
Yeah, I made $120,000 on that. But man, so we'll roll into some shop talk here. Tom, I know you've been traveling a lot, man. What you got going on in the shop?
I got a wooden sign that I'll be making with a combination of the scroll saw and CNC that I got to get done. That's everything else is just house projects that, I need to get to, but I just, I had it install today. I've got to install tomorrow morning. I've got to install Thursday morning and install Friday and an install on Saturday. And I got a bunch of stuff to do on the farm. And so trying to squeeze in shop time this time, it'll be better here in a few weeks, but once we get all the planting done, but man, just seems like I don't have time to breathe.
Right.
Are you keeping that CNC busy? Your second employee in the shop?
Not yet. I finally got it going and I made some signs and other stuff with it, but I haven't marketed it any yet because I really wanted to kind of master it, but get proficient. And I've not used it as much in the last couple of weeks because one, I was gone for a whole week. And the week before I left, I had so much to do out on the farm. I didn't have any shop time. So, but it by the end of this year, I think that will be my full-time gig, but I believe that I'll be able to put it to work because it keeps
awesome.
it busy. But
did you break a bit yet?
Yes.
Good.
Broke one up.
It's a rite of passage.
Yeah, man. But I was amazed at how much I used the bit before it broke. Because I was thinking, oh man, I'm gonna break this thing the first 5 minutes. But and it was a smaller bit. It wasn't like I broke a half-inch bit or anything. But I was doing a sign that had some really fine detail, and I literally was almost done with the sign when I broke the bit. I couldn't believe it. I had used that bit for, I would probably say several hours of routing before I broke it. So, and it wasn't like it was a high-end bit, so.
Did you have to cycle back through your whole program and mill a bunch of air until it got back and finished it?
Yeah. What it was is when it broke, so my CNC, I don't have tool changers. So I have to, output each tool path and run them. And so where it broke at, it was just doing fine detail. So I changed a bit, reset the tool path, and just ran that tool path. And,
got it.
It wasn't a big deal, but so that's
now,
the only
Mike,
one.
Do you have a CNC?
I do. This is my first year of having one, and it's a steep learning curve for me. I know Tom is coming from this has been his vocation for a long time, and he knows all the software. And although I'm pretty tech savvy, I mean this whole software for vectors and things like that, it's so outside of things that I've done with software that it is a steep learning curve for me. So
it was for me as well. The only benefit that I had was that I knew how to create vector graphics already to bring into it. So that part I understood, but it was learning all the different programming of the tool paths and everything. But I bought that program from Kyle at Learn Your CNC, and man, fantastic program. He really did a good job on that. But I mean, it is hours and hours and hours of video. If I had to guess, I would probably say 24 plus hours of videos. And I would watch the videos and then have my laptop with the software. That way I could do it as he was doing it. And
smart.
Now I feel very comfortable with it. So now it's just really more of practicing and really learning all the different bits and everything.
So what CNC do you have?
What's that?
What CNC do you have?
It's a Onefinity.
Yep.
It's the 32 inch by 32 inch cutting area one. So I forget I think it's called the Woodworker.
Yep.
And it ends up being, so I actually kind of thought that it was going to be, maybe 3.5, 4x4 type of space. It is an easy 5x5 space once you get everything placed and you need, all of the axes to be able to travel, and like you can't have anything on that tabletop for that 5x5 space. So it is even though that looked like, once I measured everything out, like, oh, I got space for that. It's a lot bigger, like a foot more in each direction of what I expected, but it's great. I love it.
It's awesome.
What I need to do is get smarter about batching out projects just in general in woodworking. I've been just custom one-off everything, not realizing that if one person wants it, there's likely demand behind that one person, at least to the tune of 2, 3, 4, or 5 other of those projects. And it's so much easier to just batch something out. Harder, certainly more time and effort and materials going into it for that project, but less in the sum of all of it compared to doing it all custom every single dang time. And so I just need to get smarter about that. If I'm making a cutting board, I need to make 3. If I'm doing, one of these like Celtic crosses that I've been making recently, I need to make 5 of those. I just need to get better about batching it out, and that's going to save me a lot of heartache.
Yeah.
So is that what you got going on in your shop then?
Yeah, right now I got my whiteboard here. So I've got these 2 big votive candle stands for a local church that I'm making. That'll be like 4 by 2, kind of 36-inch tall table stands, and they're going to be filled with sand, and candles will go in them, and you'll be able to light them for. But I'm, of course, totally over engineering this. So I did like box joints and all the corners, and then and I'd never messed around with that. So you got to make a jig to do all of that, and then for the top, I'm going to do some like decorative inlays and stuff like that in the tops. And there's 2 of them, so they all have to match each other too. So that's been like this church, bless their heart for being as patient as they have been with me. But the pastor told me, there's no deadline or anything, and I'm like, oh, I'm not. I swear I'm not taking.
There's always a deadline.
You said that, but I'm also very thankful for their patience. But yeah, every time I get in the shop, I do a little bit of that, here and there. And while maybe glue is setting for some aspect of that project, I'm dabbling into a few orders. A friend of mine is a realtor, and so I've got a cutting board out there with some. I do the CNC for the lettering, and then I did like an epoxy inlay for it to be like a really crisp lettering inlaid in the wood. That looks really nice. So yeah, I've got those, and then I've got I do these verses. So it's like this live edge pine slabs, and then people pick like a Bible verse that they want, and then still got the bark on the edges. It's only about a 1/2 inch thick, so it's not what you think of when you think of like a live edge slab, but it's really thinly sliced live edge slabs, and it's just a really nice, I think it's pine, really nice kind of backer for putting in this verse. And then some I've spray painted and then sanding it all down to reveal the letters that were spray painted, carved out of it. And then a few of them I've put the epoxy in there, and that actually, it's a lot more work with the epoxy, and its setup time is a lot longer and all of that. And you can't just sand it. Like you kind of got to, well, I do sand it, but I'd run it through the drum sander. So it's a bit of a cheater method, but it's more work, but it makes the letters pop so much more. And so I've got a few of those with different verses that I need to make.
Yeah.
That's
Those
awesome.
live edge ones that you do, are you buying those pre-made, or you have a
It's so
sawmill
funny.
bandsawing it? Well,
Yeah, I was at Hobby Lobby the other day. My kids were buying some art crafts, and I saw them there, like those thin sliced, really nice live edge boards that are very similar to the ones I have, and they're selling for like $50 each. Now, granted, that's like a one-off type of thing, and I would never buy lumber or anything from Hobby Lobby, but I was really lucky to a friend of our family who I grew up going to church with. She saw some of the stuff I was doing, on Facebook or on Instagram, and she texted me and said, "Do you want these?" And she actually, this hanging up in the background, I know that this is just on the podcast, but that was a back of a piano, like a decorative inlay from back of a piano that she had, and it was beautiful artwork carved into that wood. And so I just refinished it and put that on the wall. But when I was out there to pick that up too, she had a stack of these, and she was going to sell them at this garage sale, and they had some like mold on them and like water damage and stuff. But I'm like, oh, that'll sand out. And like the whole stack of these things, which I've got, I don't know, maybe 40 of them, was like $50. And so like I've got those. I don't know how I'm going to get more of them when they're gone, because it's such a thinly sliced, really nice.
Find yourself a sawmill.
Yeah, I'd have to either get them at a sawmill or like find a really nice slab myself, which is going to have the bark that'll actually stay on, which is nearly impossible if you've ever worked with live edge. Like that stuff just falls off. For some reason, there's no glue or anything. It's just this bark is really strongly adhered to this wood, and it's super thin. So I'll have to get a bandsaw. My bandsaw is a little 10-inch Rikon, and it's my resaw capacity is literally 4 3/8 inch, and that you can't do a whole lot of resawing with that.
Yeah, that's awesome. As far as me, I haven't had really any shop time. I actually lent out my planer. I've got one of the DeWalt lunchbox planers.
Yeah.
Long story short, so I'm board of director of our church camp, and this past fall we had a big donation given to camp, and we took that donation. It was kind of earmarked for this, to build a fireplace in the main dining hall. We'd never had a fireplace in there, and so we had this gorgeous brick fireplace built. And then somebody else that's part of camp donated the material and the time and labor to put in like a wood wall around the fireplace. Really gorgeous. Well, he called me. He's like, well, I know you're a woodworker. Do you have a planer, and is it portable? I was like, yeah, what's up? He bought all the lumber from Amish, and it's all rough sawn. And he's like, I need to plane this stuff down, and he's like, I don't want to plane it all the way down, but I want to just kind of smooth out a little bit. Well, you want to skip plane it. And so he's got my planer. He's done with it. I'm waiting for him to text me when he's bringing it back. So I can't do much woodworking on that end. I do want to build some bird houses and bird feeders. I've got some cedar for my father-in-law. My father-in-law has a sawmill, and so I get all my wood from him. And it's a blessing.
You married up.
Yeah, definitely. He actually bought it after we got together, but nonetheless, kind of interesting though. So when we first started the podcast, I built this small little desk to do my podcast on, and ended up outgrowing that because I now work from home a couple days a week, and so I built a bigger desk, and I had this little live edge, well, it was a live edge, but cherry desk that I built, really nice. And I posted on Facebook, and I shot for the moon at a couple $100. I was like, yeah, whatever. And I lowered the price down a little bit, and then it's been sitting for a couple of weeks, and I hadn't heard, nobody had pinged me about it. And then all of a sudden we're getting ready to go into church Sunday, and somebody pings me and they said, hey, do you still have the table? And I said, the desk. I said, yeah. And they asked me about a couple of the measurements, sizes, and they came and got it that afternoon, which was Mother's Day. And I thought for whatever reason I had $100 on it. I didn't. I had like $150 on it still. And so it was kind of a nice little surprise. I sold the desk and got a little bit of extra cash. And so that was kind of nice, but I haven't done anything in the shop in the last while. Just been busy with work and church stuff, and lots of stuff going on, but definitely want to get back out there. And although I say that, and I did, so I've got a Willie's Wood Honey that I sell, and
I need to buy some of that from you.
Yeah. Shoot me a message after this. I'll hook you up. But we have a big sunroom on the back of our house, and we're in the process of converting it into a full 4-season room. And so I've done half of it so far, and so the other half has to get done. And so I took a portion of that. I was going to make it my studio for podcasting office, and that's still going to happen eventually. But I made it into a fulfilling station. So I've got boxes and a table there for making the boxes and packaging stuff up and putting labels on and all that. And so that was kind of a nice little thing to just some organization to get out of the way that I've been needing to do. But yeah, outside of that, I hadn't really done anything in the shop, and I'm itching to make some sawdust and do some stuff out there soon. I started making a turkey call out of some walnut and some.
Oh, really? Like on a lathe?
No. So it's like you make a
I guess I don't know what a turkey call is. I was thinking,
yeah, well, that's a reed. Yeah, the turkey reed. This is just like you mill up a piece of wood, like 2x2, and then you mortise out a cavity in it with thin walls, and then you take another piece of wood and you round over the bottom of it, and you attach it, and you screech the side of the woods together, and it makes the. And so I'm in the process of making that. I haven't done anything with it in the last few days, but been tinkering around with that a little bit.
That reminds me though of making music with wood is my daughter the other day was like, well, I don't know, I was beating on her. I made her a big bunk bed. And when I say prayers to her, when I'm putting her to bed, the stairs are like right in front of me and she's up in her bunk bed. And I usually am like, sometimes tapping out drums on her wooden stairs because each of the steps is a little bit different tone.
Right. Oh yeah.
And so
you are
like,
my people.
yeah, she was like, Dad, we should make wooden drums. And I'm like, that is brilliant. Because I've seen those before where and
I have
in
one.
Different project. Anytime you have them, you've made some?
Well, I have a cajon, which is you sit on it and you play it,
And it's made of wood?
Yeah.
I've wanted to build one of those. Have you ever seen the band? I'm gonna have
Rusted Root.
Having a brain fart here.
Trying to think of drummer bands.
Oh my goodness! This is gonna drive me crazy. That I
you gonna Google it?
No, I'm gonna have to look on my playlist on my my other phone because that's where all my music's at.
So is this cajon, is there different tonal regions of the
No, it's just you sit on it and I guess I don't have it. It's at church now. I donate it to the church, but it's a wooden box. You sit on it, and then the front of it is a thin wood there's some snares on the inside of it, and you just kind of tap on it, and you can do bass sounds with it. And
nice.
I grew up playing that in like youth group. If we do like acoustic type worship sessions, I'd jump on the cajon and play that instead of playing like a full drum kit or whatever.
That's awesome.
But
I'm picturing like bongos you'd kind of put in between your knees, and a lower tonal range and then a higher one. And every time I've ever made a box, there's some aspect of me tapping on the back of the box and like
absolutely
playing a every time I make a little box, I'm like, oh, that's a nice little sound that comes out. So I can just picture square bongos or something with
I've seen those. There's lap drums that are like that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, my daughter was my muse for that moment. She's like, let's make some wooden drums. I'm like, that's brilliant. I can't wait.
Yeah. The name of that band is Unspoken. And the drummer when we saw him in concert, he did an entire song just on the cajon. He said it, dude, it was amazing. Like, he is bad to the bone, man. It was jamming. But one of the best concerts I've ever seen. They are absolutely phenomenal.
We actually last Friday went to Brandon Lake and saw him in concert.
Oh, really? I'm jealous.
Yeah, the thing about it that I really appreciate about Brandon Lake is how authentic he was. A big concert, Peterson Event Center. I think they said there's like 8,000 or 9,000 people there, and it was there to worship. Like, it wasn't it was big, it was production, it was huge, but like, it was authentic worship. That just leading worship with a bunch of people, and then during the concert they had like this breakdown session where just him and acoustic guitar and then Cody Carnes showed up
Oh, I love
to-
him, man.
and did a whole set with Cody Carnes. And so, but yeah, man, awesome. I could talk music all day. I love me some music, but Michael, where can people find you on social media? And what are your hashtags or your hashtags? Is that even a thing anymore?
I don't know. You're making my hands sweat. Do I even know what my name is on there? It's 10,000 makes. I think is how you would find
And
me.
that's spelt out, right? 10,000.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Yep. Just the letters. So TEN 1,000 makes. So I'm on Instagram and on YouTube. Same name on both places, and then I suppose on Facebook as well. Anything I do on Instagram, I repost over onto Facebook too.
Right. Awesome, man. Well, we really appreciate you coming on the podcast. It's been a joy to hear your testimony and just chat about Bibles and drums and all the stuff. And so
I love it. It's been an honor, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, until next week, I'm Will from Flat Woodworks.
And I'm Tom from Mountain Valley Maker.